Hello and welcome to episode 135 of Authors Afterword. On this podcast, I talk to an author about one, occasionally more, of their books in detail. And if you find yourself enjoying today's episode, do share it with your friends. So, I'm Charlie Place, and joining me today is Phoenicia Rogerson, formerly of the novel Herc, but now also of the novel Aphrodite. Unsurprisingly, this is the story of the goddess of love, who might, according to Phoenicia's narrative, in fact be the goddess of lies. In the beginning were the Titans, and as they fought amongst themselves and Cronus cut off Uranus's balls, Aphrodite was created from those cast-offs in the sea. She starts her life fully adult and living in a cave where the threads of fate won't leave her alone, and she ends up weaving them. As time passes, she meets Prometheus and starts to be visited by a child called Zeus, who has ideas of grandeur thanks to his upbringing, being the sole child of Cronus and Rhea, who escaped being eaten. Aphrodite never shows her face to Zeus, and that works out well, as one day she decides she'd like to leave her cave and live on Olympus, and the easiest way to achieve that is to pretend to be Zeus's child and thus a potential goddess herself. Hello Phoenicia, welcome.
Hello, and thank you for that summary. I'm always impressed when anyone can pull it together in a way that makes sense, because there's so much going on.
There is. I'm going to get into that in a bit, actually. So, why this book? I suppose, why Aphrodite?
I think Aphrodite is really interesting because she is a goddess, and in almost every version of the story that is not mine, she is a goddess. I have one source that I have lent into very hard to get the version I have. But even in all the other sources, she is much older than the other gods. So she exists in this kind of space of being right in the middle of all of the craziness that is Olympus and everything that gods are doing. But she also has a bit more perspective of remembering what it's like to be in another time and in another place and just not being quite like them. So I think that split between the two sides of her makes her really interesting as a lens to view the gods.
Okay. Can you tell us more about this original source that you've used and why you decided to change things?
Yeah, so there is one Pausanius quote that describes her as the oldest of the Fates, and the Fates are the people who weave the threads of fate. Most notably, they have one very large pair of scissors and they cut the threads of mortals when they're about to die. This is really well covered, unusually, in the Disney movie Hercules. They are mixed up with the grey-eyed ones, who are the ones with only one tooth and one eye between them. But that's what the Fates generally do, is they mark the end of a mortal lifespan. But they can do much more than that. They can do a lot of prediction, which really comes up in the book. And having Aphrodite have some of these powers, because even in the big sources where she's just a goddess, she doesn't have a lot of the same powers the other gods do. She doesn't frequently turn into other animals or control mist or things like that. She generally does just go with the line, I'm beautiful and I can make people fall in love, and
Yeah.
that's enough. So I thought it was quite an interesting take on her to say, actually, she's acts different because she is different.
You say about the fates and stuff. Why did you choose to go with that and kind of putting all this together and having her with them?
So she's not entirely with them, and I think that's one of the more interesting parts of it. I think something Aphrodite feels a lot of the time in the book is this sense of being out of place and of not belonging, which is obviously partly on her. When you go and lie to everyone about who you are not necessarily going to belong in the place you say you do. But with Aphrodite being the oldest of the fates, she is never really described as being with the other fates, the ones we normally think about with the capital letters. And I think there's just so much loneliness that comes from having been there by yourself and seeing the next people get to have company.
Mm.
And I think it's really interesting to consider how that story might have been different if she hadn't been by herself. And that slow degradation that comes from being alone, like depending on your lockdown experience, you might have had some of this of just rattling around.
Oh, true. That's interesting you say that, because I think for me, and I know that you say in your author's note at the start, like you can take away what you want from the book. For me, that was kind of your Terry Pratchett moment when she'd go back to the Fates and they were all like, oh, this, that, and the other, and the little bits of the wording, and you've got the indented sentences and everything.
Yeah, I mean, you have no idea how happy it makes me whenever anyone references my work in the same conversation as Terry Pratchett, who does not want to be Terry Pratchett when they grow up. Um, but yeah, I had a lot of fun with them as well. And this is quite a long way away as an experience, but when I was in university, I ran a board game society.
Hmm.
and I have met the people who are running it these days. And I am in many ways so proud of where it's gone. And also, just my mind is blown by how much it has changed and the different ways things are done. And seeing that transition between something that used to be all yours, not all mine. I was part of a committee, not a dictator, no matter what people might have thought. But seeing where it went, how things happen when they're out of your hands. And I think Aphrodite has a lot of that because she sees all of the pain and all of the struggle that was getting this to work in the first place. And she feels it's just quite easy for them and they have it all handed to them because she did all the work and she doesn't get the recognition for it.
Yeah, no, I liked how they just suddenly appear in your book. I mean, obviously there's a mythological basis for them, but in your book they do kind of suddenly appear, which I think worked with Aphrodite, yeah.
Well, it happens quite a lot where, because there are so many gods, it does seem that sometimes they just got written in because a space in the story needed filling,
Mm.
which I am guilty of as well. But normally I can blame an older author for it. I'm just using the sources.
Yeah, you definitely can do that. So the writing itself, I think, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed your book. It was completely not what I was expecting. I haven't read Herc, but I did look it up before, you've come and talked to me so that I knew. Yeah, I think I was expecting more of your kind of just a mythology retelling. So it was an absolute delight. And I have to say, I did love it. It was hilarious. So I think for me, definitely, it's the writing that really got to me the most. So I did want to ask you about that. Like your choice of language is very modern. There's a lot of slang. You've leaned into the whole sexuality of the gods. What's your choice and why do you like writing in this way?
I think there are two prongs to that answer. And now watch me give four answers for those two prongs. For the writing style being quite modern, I will live and die on the hill that when these stories were first told, they were told in a writing style that was modern.
Yes.
It was a long time ago. So part of it comes from mirroring that. Part of it comes from the fact that I have been an obsessive about Greek mythology since I was very, very small. And a lot of it is the way it has always sounded in my head. And part of translating is translating into a way that makes sense. And I think one of the reasons these stories are so exciting is because a lot of it remains very topical, and part of being topical is being understood. And part of all of this is that I am not an English literature student. I have never loved the long descriptive passages so much as I've loved the interactions between people.
Sure.
And for me, they're much more real when it's easier. Not that everything should be spelled out to everyone, but you don't have to think about what they're saying so much as you can feel what they're saying. And for me, having a more modern tone allows that much more easily.
Yeah, no, I think also you're making me think of the effective white space that you've got that says a lot. I was trying to think earlier. I think you've got a chapter that's just like a sentence. I'm pretty sure you've just got this sentence on a page and then it says the name.
Told you I'd be back.
That's it, yeah. And I love that because it's just a sentence in the page and it says so much without literally saying much, yeah.
This is something I'm so happy with my publishers and with my editor as well. So much of the cool typesetting in Aphrodite comes from my editor. Seema is amazing. I will shout her praises across many platforms. But yeah, because sometimes it does really feel like I've got away with something. And there's a couple of bits in Herc as well where I've been allowed to have a chapter which is just names listed for 6 pages, or things like numbered lists, or all of this white space or the change in formatting. And part of it is I just think it's really fun. I've always loved epistolary form. It got me with Dracula, and I've stayed there forever. And I really like with these very big stories, putting them together kind of piecemeal and seeing all of the ways they might have been seen from different angles.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you about the angles and kind of the ensemble in a minute. But you saying about epistolary, yes, there's a certain kind of... You use a particular kind of first person that I have actually struggled to think exactly what name you'd give it. And it's kind of epistolary, it's first person, it's kind of breaking the fourth wall, it's all these kind of things. And yeah, and then you've got the comedy which adds to it. I'm going to actually ask you about Zeus in particular, because I thought you got he's very whiny. Obviously as a child, it makes more sense. But I just loved how you wrote him, because I think what you've done is, with the writing, yes, you've made it very relevant, but you've also brought it so that you're concentrating on the feeling and you're getting the feelings and the emotions. which is particularly apparent, I think, in Zeus, where you've got this person who is not a great person, and yet you're showing us why, etc. Can you tell us about writing Zeus particularly?
So my general position on people and on characters is that no one thinks they're the bad guy in their own story.
Hmm.
No one wakes up and thinks, I'm going to be the villain today, apart from potentially various presidents. But generally, people think what they are doing is right in the framework that they exist in.
Hmm.
I think from the outside, Zeus does many, many horrible things, and this is not really in question. What I'm doing is not trying to justify the things that he does, it's to contextualize it
Hmm.
and to contextualize how you get there and what world makes you be like this, which with the Greek gods is quite often daddy issues, I will admit. But Zeus has this very particular upbringing where he is born and he has all of these siblings, but they are growing up together and he is not. And I think there's a loneliness that comes with that, as well as being born and being told, okay, now act like you don't exist. One day you will be the most important person in the world, but for now you don't exist. And your entire life being brought up to kill your own father and to destroy what you know, and the reward for this being the entire world, and that just being a fact for all of your life. And then when you get there, it not being what it was promised, I think it's a difficult thing for your mind to take. Like, we've all had moments growing up where the world has not been what we expected or what we felt it was promised.
Hmm.
I think one of my particularly jarring ones was when I hit the job market for the first time, and it was so, so difficult. And it just felt like no one had ever warned me that it was going to be so difficult.
Yeah.
And like with all of my examples, because I am a mortal who lives in a flat in London and not a Greek god, my experience is much smaller than anything the gods would have had. But yeah, I think for Zeus, it's this disconnect between being told he was going to get paradise and paradise being full of people who don't love him.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. And actually, a different subject, you've just brought it up. I liked how, by focusing on the gods, we're seeing how insignificant the mortals are in a way. We're kind of being very humbled. And then at the same time, you're showing the importance of people.
Yeah, I think that is true. One of the differences between Aphrodite and Herc is that Herc only has mortal voices and Aphrodite only has immortal voices. For a certain definition of immortal, I kind of lean on it sometimes.
Mm.
But my broad feeling is that the difference between being mortal and immortal is so conceptually massive, it's very difficult to have those voices existing alongside each other.
Mm.
Like, even my friends who are vegetarian and some of the ones who are vegan don't have an issue putting fly paper up or moth killing spray or anything like that. And for me, there's not a moral issue with that kind of thing. I'm sure for some people there are, but I think for a lot of the gods, people function much more like that, or even on a good day, like puppies, um, like as playthings. But something we see with the gods is they are going to say the fourth age, they might be the fifth age. But let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, fourth age, I think it would. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the gods are the fourth age, and so they already know they're not the beginning. They are completely aware that they're not the beginning. They were not the first people to come into power the way they did, with sons killing their fathers and seizing power from them. So I think there should have been more awareness than there was that they were part of a cycle. But we all believe we're going to live forever at a certain point. But humans represent progress, and the progress is always moving forward. And we do see that with the generations and the overthrowing and the infighting. Actually, a lot of it leads to the same place, which is moving on,
Mm.
and immortality doesn't always gel with moving on. So I think the humans are important for more than being playthings and being pets. They show that time is coming, and any mortal lifespan might be very short in comparison, but man, is there a lot of us.
That's true, yeah. I mean, yeah, talking of the ending, obviously you've got Aphrodite kind of doing her machinations to make things happen, but it's humans that see the effective end of these Greek gods. Obviously they go into the Roman gods, but it's humans pushing that along.
Yeah, and it's one of the things the gods end up in more of a predicament about than the Titans or the people who came before them, is that so much of what they do and what they value is how much people worship them and how much people pay tribute to them. and what is attributed to them. Like humans are around the entire time the gods are. So it's something they always have to live with and deal with and vie for. So they, in a lot of ways, give humans a lot of power over them. And you see that going into the Romans. Obviously, this is past the end of the events of the book, but which gods are more or less important to the Greeks versus the Romans? So, for instance, Neptune is much less worshipped in Rome than Poseidon is in Greece. Athena going into Minerva does very badly, which I think would make Aphrodite quite happy. Aphrodite does quite well going into Venus. So you do get this change in power as the mortals, as the humans change their society. Though an interesting note on this, which is not in the book, Apollo was the only one of the gods to keep his name. And I think there's a really interesting emotional point about what that would mean to him versus the others.
I don't know so much about the Romans versions. I know more about the Greek. Yeah, that's interesting. You said something, I think it was a couple of answers back, about why you'd chosen not to include like mortal voices. You've chosen more to do gods in this book. I suppose that answers the question, because I wondered if you'd have Dionysus in the narrative at all, and I don't think he gets one, does he?
He did in a draft, which is my answer to most things. I don't think I've ever written as many words for a book as I wrote for Aphrodite. So there's a lot of characters who had a chapter at one point. And as we tried to pull everything together and make it more cohesive, there are various things that got cut. But it is probably good for the reader that Dionysus chapter is not in there because it is entirely without punctuation. So Dionysus is the god of actually a lot of things, but among them, he's the god of madness and the god of ecstasy. So it's a lot of this power of the confusion of his thoughts and everything vying for the top of them.
Yeah.
And it's a even more turned up version of Zeus when he's at his most paranoid and the thoughts are kind of battering him. Yeah, because if I had endless time and endless word count, I would have spent quite a lot of time on Aphrodite's lineage with Harmonia and then Semele and then Dionysus, because I think that's so interesting. And it's a bit of her power that comes through as well, because Dionysus gets added to the Council of the 12 Olympians, which obviously to keep it at 12 means someone has to be kicked off the Council of the 12 Olympians. And that means it switches from being 6 men, 6 women to 7 men, 5 women, which is part of a greater societal move, most likely, for patriarchal versus matriarchal society.
Yeah.
I have gone a long way from the original question here, but it's always quite interesting how these things can reflect things that were going on or might have been going on. And you need to have a pinch of salt about using these stories to justify what might have been happening at the time, because sometimes stories are just stories, but it's interesting how the world reflects things back and forth.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, I don't know so much of the ins and outs. I want to say, is it Hestia that's kind of lopped off the end of the list?
Hestia steps back to stop that starting a war.
Yeah.
And it's not always Dionysus who takes a position on the council. Sometimes it's Hercules or Heracles, if you prefer, which is, again, interesting because they are also both sons of Zeus, and that comes with a lot of baggage. And Zeus's general attempts to overtake everything with the people he thinks will be loyal to him. But I decided to step away from that entire argument, given that Herc ends with Herc's death.
I mean, I was thinking of it, you've made me think of it again, and I was thinking about it when I read your book, that they keep bringing more people to the fore. And obviously it's all mythology, so, it's not necessarily going to be that if civilizations kept these gods carrying on, it would change. But it is interesting how you've got like this fourth generation and then the fifth generation coming up, and you do wonder what would have happened and stuff like that, if it had carried on, that story.
And arguably that story is still carrying on, and we're just enjoying a good long generation right now. But I live in fear of what the sixth would be then.
So, yeah, you said that you had lots of other narratives. I would like to ask you, is there any others that we might want to know about, just from you like telling us about them?
Definitely the most unhinged I've ever looked writing in public, because I joke when I'm actively drafting that I'm going around with my emotional support laptop, and anywhere and everywhere the laptop is out. But in one of the very early versions of this, Persephone had a chapter, and Persephone is very concerned with time because she has her split between time in the above world and her split between time in the underground with Hades. But she also ends up with a timeshare on Adonis with Aphrodite, which is why this whole story is in there. I love writing about Adonis. Aphrodite and Persephone both do so many weird things in the fight about Adonis. So I had Persephone very concerned about time and it passing and when these seasons were switching over. So I decided to get into character while I was writing this chapter. I would listen to the sound of a metronome. And I'm on this train and I go on YouTube and I put on a metronome ticking noise. And it's a very busy train and there is someone next to me and they see me do this. And I am wearing headphones, so I'm not that much of a monster. But it's an hour and it stops and I haven't finished the chapter. So I put it back to the beginning. And the person next to me on the train just looks over and is like, what is wrong with you?
It's better than watching TikToks without headphones or anything. That's all right, yeah.
Yeah, as long as I'm listening to my metronome sounds with headphones, I think I'm okay. But probably the most I've ever concerned a stranger.
Well, I don't know. I thought you were about to say you dressed up or something. So I think, if you're listening to stuff with your headphones, that's okay. Who is your favourite mythological character? Have you got one?
Oh, yes. I was going to demur on this, but no, it's Cadmus. It's always been Cadmus.
Okay.
And part of that is a big personal bias because Cadmus's family is the family in mythology that eventually starts Phoenicia. So my bias is immediate and powerful.
Yeah.
And this is in the book. But I think his love story with Harmonia is the most lovely in Greek mythology. It's the only one where they seem to love each other all the way through. They stick up for each other. He has a very rough run of it through life. And I think it's rare that you get to see a mortal who actually gets angry at the gods because of the way they treat him. It's very rarely directed at him. It's either directed at Harmonia and he's caught in the crossfire, or it's directed at his sister, who is Europa, and he is caught in the crossfire. So he is not really the direct subject of any of these horrible things that happen, but that doesn't stop them happening to him. So seeing him absolutely lose it, I think, is refreshing in a world of quite a lot of piety.
So, as far as I'm aware, Cadmus turns into a serpent. What was your decision to make it dragons? I suppose because you wanted him to have a better life, future, or whatever?
No, it's because the first version of that story I ever read translated as dragon rather than serpent.
Ah, okay.
So that's just like fully what it locked into my head as.
Fair enough, fair enough. I think it changes the story in a quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Significant. I'm going to use the word significant. It makes it quite a lot more powerful, I think, also, as well.
And it's actually not something I've spent too much time thinking about, but serpents come with an entire bucket load of symbolism. And at the time, I believe, had a lot of symbolism with women, especially. And I think that is probably an interesting line to explore for what that meant about Cadmus and his behaviors and what they represented. Because something I love with Cadmus is that he is not so toxically masculine as I think all of the other heroes.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting, actually. Yeah, you saying that, because he's kind of got a quieter existence, definitely. But there's something really, I don't know, powerful, significant about his story and the end of it, definitely. I would like to go a little bit, I suppose, more specific or deeper into how you've written this book, because, as I said, I loved it. So I do want to say, for anyone who happens to be listening to this, is all right with spoilers and hasn't read the book, and also people who might not remember all of them, and I will say I don't know if I've got all of the types here, but we have got an effective multimedia within the writing. I think that's the easiest way of summing it up. You've got news reports, you've got letters, you've got the regular prose, obviously. You've got the footnotes, one repeated word for a third of a page, which I thought was, yeah, I'm going to ask you about that in a minute because it's just different. And then, as you said, you've got the different font sizes that your editors let you have and the family trees. Yeah, I can't ask you about every single one of them because we would be here all day and it will make a very long show. But I do want to ask about that one repeated word. You've got it. It's about Prometheus. It's pain, 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 pain. What was your decision on this bit? Like, why do this?
I wanted something that shows the unending and unwavering nature of it. I think sometimes it's more powerful to get something different than it is to just say in words. Like we're always told, show, don't tell. Sometimes you just want to tell, otherwise your book will be 1,000 pages long.
Mhm.
But it's very difficult to show without getting into this kind of lurid torture porn stage, like what that pain would mean and what it would represent. And I am fortunate, like most people, to have never had my liver eaten by an eagle. So I can't personally describe too much about that. And actually, the worst pain I've ever had happened after writing the book, and I think that would have helped quite a lot. But brush your teeth, kids. Yeah, so I wanted something a bit different, and I played around with putting the word in the biggest font that would fit on a page.
Okay.
But I think having it in the small font and consistently shows that you get waves of it a little bit, but also that there is no space around it, that it will fill all the space it can. And of course, I'm a sucker for anything with different formatting, which is the lighter answer.
Yeah. That's interesting to think about. Yes, because well, I suppose it's a bit like what not quite, but that whole kind of thing where you're kind of immune to something like with the Hunger Games you have it over and over and over again. By book 3 you're like, yeah, okay, some people are dying, which is horrific really, but you know, you've seen it so much. It's like, yeah, that happens. In that, yeah, you've got the knowledge that we have that the eagles come in every day and eating the liver, and Prometheus is having to watch the humans every day and the awful things that are happening with them. And then Aphrodite comes and visits and we hear about it. But yeah, in your repetition, you've made us really hone in on that in a way that I suppose also with the comedy of it, the slight comedy, you're always wondering if there'll be a comedy. It's stronger there, maybe, than literally when we are hearing what's happening.
Yeah, I think because it's one of the more famous stories in Greek mythology,
Hmm.
my poor partner gets quite a lot of me polling him for do people know this? Do people who are not me know this?
Sure, yeah.
But I think in general it's one of the more better known stories about Prometheus. And it gets repeated so often, I think it takes away a lot of the sting of it, and people don't consider what it's like. And yeah, a couple of members of my family when I was growing up were in chronic pain. So while I didn't experience it, I saw a lot of it and what that does and what knowing it's coming tomorrow does. And I wanted a bigger way to show that than just say, this man is in pain. The sacrifice he made to give humanity fire is profound and ongoing,
Hmm.
and we shouldn't wipe it away for any reason.
Yeah, giving people fire. I mean, it's a dangerous thing and it's also very, very important to have. I suppose I also want to ask then about the footnotes because I loved them. I thought they were great. Were they something that you'd always wanted to include?
While writing this book, yes.
Hmm.
Always, always no, but they are probably my favorite part of the book. I had such a blast writing those footnotes. And the practical reason they're there is that there's a lot of names in the book. There is an entire author's note about how many names there are in the book. And there are a lot of different methods employed in the book to deal with all the names. But fundamentally, I didn't want to strip them all back because what I have always loved about Greek mythology is that it's this massive interconnected web of people and stories and how they slot together and how sometimes the entire timeline falls apart and I have to deal with it. So I like keeping them in there for the people who love that because at my core, I want to write books I would have loved. And there's a strange emotional beat about them being books that I wrote, so I can never really read them like a reader, but I wanted the names in there as food for the people like me. But I also spoke to a number of people after Herc came out who said, like, oh, when I was reading it, I kept having to like get Wikipedia out or I made notes. And I really, really love the dedication a lot of people put into that. I think it's amazing and so cool that so many people cared enough about something I wrote to do that. But personally, as a reader, if I don't recognize the name of something, I let it whoosh right over my head. And when they appear a second or third time, I will remember who they are. But normally, I assume if I don't know who they are, they don't matter. So I was surprised by how different the experience for other readers is to me, which is maybe not my most empathetic moment. So practically, the footnotes are to balance me wanting the depth without taking away from most people's experiences. But it turned out to be quite a fun way to keep Aphrodite present and eavesdropping on everyone
Yeah.
and butting in and having her own opinions. And the way they handle it in the audiobook is so good.
Do they have different people coming in?
So my audiobooks have a lot of different narrators because my audio editor is the best person in the world. But in a lot of the chapters, when there's a footnote, the narrator for Aphrodite, Kristen Atherton, will literally butt into the middle of another narrator's chapter.
So at the time that the footnote is shown in the numbers, I love that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because with footnotes, I mean, I'm someone who's struggled with them, particularly in like non-fiction, and usually I really don't like seeing them in a book. I have to be honest, because I never know when you're meant to read them. Whereas with yours, I felt that you are meant to read them straight away, because if you leave them until the end of the page, you've forgotten what was going on with them. So yeah, I did appreciate that with yours.
Yeah, I always imagined them at the time and in the moment. It's been a long time since I read non-fiction with footnotes. Well, it might be all the way back to my degree.
Sure.
But yeah, Aphrodite's footnotes are absolutely meant to be read in text. And if you decide you don't care about them, you can skip them. They are not textually relevant. I think there's one footnote in the first or second chapter which spoils the ending, but otherwise.
Oh, I like that. You've got so much here. I mean, I know, like, in your author's note, and I know I've mentioned it earlier, that you say you can read this book however you want. And I mean, here is also what you're saying here. You have thought so much about the reading experience, but also about people not having to care about this and not having to, but also care about that. And it just goes on so much more. There's so much more layers to your writing beyond the writing itself.
Some of this comes down to the fact that I've been a reader for a long, long time before I was a writer, and I will be a reader for way after I am a writer. And I think I will be writing until my fingers stop working. But yeah, books have always been the thing I love the best. Even Greek mythology loses to books in the long run. So I have always hoarded them like a little dragon. It was a problem. I ran out of bookshelf space as a child, so I made a book wall, and it was like 7 foot square. I was very proud of my book haul, but I always loved seeing the little bits that were different. And I think I was not very curated in my reading as a child because I got through things so fast that I would just like grab anything and everything. And I think having that like big pool of things to pull from made me very sticky fingered, like, oh, a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of this.
But you've taken it and you've made it very much into your own. Yeah.
So one of the other things I do is I write at least one short story every month. And it started as a way of keeping an eye on what I was doing because I started this when I was a teenager. And I remember looking back at the first three and being like, I use ellipses every third sentence because I'm a teenager and I'm edgy and I feel this is necessary. So to begin with, it was kind of a way of looking at bad habits, but also playing with things I didn't necessarily want to commit to writing a full book for. So that could be different tenses or point of view. But the more I did that, the more I wanted to try different things. So as newspaper articles, as letters, things like that. So I think having done that, I haven't missed a month since I was 16 and I am 29. So I have a few of these in the bank. I think doing that probably led to these books being like this because I like writing such a wide range of things and it keeps it very fresh and very exciting to come to my laptop and think, how am I going to do this bit today? How am I going to approach it?
So if you ever want a break from novels, you've got so many anthologies that you can publish instead.
These, I have to say, these are largely for myself. About once a year, I'll edit one of them, but most of them go into the folder to not look. They are, I really love writing and I really enjoy editing, but sometimes it's nice to do things that is for no one but yourself. This is just silly. This is dumb. I don't have to worry about what's coming out because it's only for me.
Sure. The chapter that's just for dead people, I do want to ask about this. What am I saying? There's a couple of this. Yeah, I'm going to try to just stay with these three elements. How much are we meant to pay attention to that list, or how much did you yourself value it, I suppose?
So the reason the list is there is to show volume and to humanize people within volume. Like there is a difference between being told 200 people died to having to read all of their names.
Yes.
And I thought this in a fairly highfalutin way as I was putting it together. I was asked to read that chapter for the audiobook, and there is a difference between typing it and between reading it. Especially, I invited one of my friends who actually speaks Greek to help me with the pronunciation. And we went through them together, and that took about 4 hours. And going through all of them like that was really, this is so many people. So, yeah, that list is largely there to humanize all the people that are lost. Because, especially when we talk about the Iliad, we tend to just talk about the main players and the big names. But obviously, anyone who's read the Iliad will remember the sheer volume of names and moving parts going on in it. And it's very easy to think and to talk about how tragic it was when Patroclus died and Achilles' reaction to that. But just about everyone in this world is loved and cared about as deeply as Achilles loved Patroclus. And I think it's important not to lose sight of all of them when there's this one story next to them. And that story should be a way of showing how much pain happened for all of these people, not just this is the most important love story in the Iliad.
That's a good point. So with this chapter then, how did you kind of collate all these names? Did you have to do lots of research and kind of, or are some of them made or?
No, I got very fortunate with this because there are, I think, a number of lists, but I used a list that someone else collated, which is why this is the chapter with an actual reference for an actual person,
Okay.
which I think was a little difficult to handle when I'd already abused footnotes so much for my own nefarious purposes. But I found a list for this, and that list actually has every injury and every death in the Iliad. So
Right.
I cut down on what was in it, but yeah, it has who was injured by whom, with what weapon, who died, and how in it, and it's incredibly detailed. But I appreciate being saved from going through and pulling that together myself, because I definitely would have missed some.
Yeah. With the large number of narrators, as you talked about that, how exactly did you decide like when to change narrator at any point? Because you've got so many, it's something I'd really like to know.
There's a couple in there, I will admit, who are in there because I like writing them and I like their voices and I think they're fun.
Who are they?
I love Aries. I love writing Aries. I have so
Yeah.
much fun every time I pick up Aries. I'm struggling to remember who's in this book now versus the
As opposed to
characters
the
I
others.
cut.
Have I heard you like Harmonia?
I do like Harmonia. Harmonia I found really difficult to pick up at the beginning, and then once I got into it, it was more straightforward. I loved writing the fates together.
Mm.
And in the secret chapters that no longer exist that were in Prometheus's point of view, I loved writing Prometheus. And similarly, I had fun with Athena.
Okay, sorry. Go back to telling me about the perspective when you decided to change them and stuff.
So it was normally the more boring answer, which is who was the best person to tell this story, who was here, who has a different contrasting experience and opinion about it.
Mm.
Because while no one thinks they're the bad guy in their own story, plenty of other people think they're the bad guy in the story. So you get that nice contrast between he said, she said.
Okay. Planning. In general, how did you plan this novel?
In many stages, many times.
Okay.
I would say this has the most moving parts of anything I've worked on. So normally what I do and how I started with Aphrodite is I tend to know the ending and then the big beats on the quarters. So I worked around that. But the big starting point with Aphrodite was reading up on her and finding this Pausanius quote and thinking, I can run with that. This is an interesting story starting from here. Then I get post-it notes and I write all of the stories I want to include and I start laying them out on my table so I can say what order makes sense, what makes a narrative, how does it work. And then I do them like that and stick them into a little flip book.
Right. Okay, so you've got it literally, you've got your literal plan so you can carry on and yeah.
Yeah, I do all of my prose on a computer now, but I do all of my planning longhand. I find it much faster and it feels less constrained, and I can do the like dodgy mind maps with the bad arrows and everything on them, and there's so much more freedom to it. I strong preference for organizing thoughts on paper.
It's also easier to access, I think, as well. I know I like, when I'm writing like blog posts and stuff, I like to do my planning in pen and paper and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And then weirdly, when it gets into doing an actual outline, when it gets quite detailed, I go into Excel first.
Yeah?
Yeah, book three at the moment has a spreadsheet where I mark off when chapters are done and what the current word count is. And I have a pie chart and a bar chart to represent these because I'm not fun.
Oh, can I make a request that you put this on Instagram or something? This is really interesting. It'd be really
My
interesting to
spreadsheet.
see it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually really satisfying because I can see my bit of the pie chart eating the smaller bit.
So, with Prometheus, obviously you followed a certain version, you changed it to how you want it. Did you consider bringing him back at all in your version of the story?
No, I was fairly decided on Prometheus's fate from very early on. And Prometheus, I should, in all fairness, say, I am yet to find any version of the story that matches what I did to him. This is, as far as I know, all me, and is what I talk about for the entire second author's note. But I think, because I'm not fun, I think sometimes even in fantasy stories, sometimes bad things have to be allowed to be bad. Like sometimes there are not easy outs and the situation is shit and it's going to hurt for a long time. And that's the kind of positive statements you get out of someone who writes humor. Um,
You've got to have the balance, you know. I mean, I think definitely humour can often kind of almost like underpin or strengthen something very profound.
yeah, I mean, it does for me, and it's the way I handle bad things in life, and a lot of the people around me handle bad things in life. And I know it is not true for everyone, and it's not what everyone does, but not everyone handles difficult situations like a stoic.
Hmm.
And that's okay. And for me, that has always felt true and right, but I know it's not true for everyone.
No, I can relate to that. Sometimes something horrible happens and the easiest way to deal with it is to be fun about it or silly. Yeah.
Yeah. One of mine on very minor scales is I'm very clumsy, and when I drop and break things, I'll just look at it and shout my own name and do jazz hands.
I like that. I like that. Yes. You said twice now, and I meant to say it earlier to point it out on the podcast, but I didn't. Yeah, you've said the second author's note. I should probably note to people why I haven't asked anything about that is because I read the arc, which I think has your first author's note in it, the kind of forward one, and not the second one. So yeah, no, I'm going to have to seek out a finished copy and look at the resources and the things that you said.
Fair enough.
What is
Yeah.
it you
I
say
mean, I
about?
could send you pictures, but I would not recommend that as a reading experience.
No, I am interested in what you said about Perseus, though. Would you mind going into to that?
Prometheus.
Yeah, sorry, Prometheus, and I think you were talking about how the end of the story and stuff, and you talked about it in your second author's note.
Yeah, so broadly, the first author's note talks about names, and the second author's note talks about sources.
Hmm.
And in it, I am very brave and honest, and concede that with Prometheus, I completely changed the ending of the story. So in Aphrodite, Prometheus is turned to stone by Perseus with Medusa's head, which is like the world's worst game of Cluedo. Um, but it's not normally Prometheus in that story. It's always Atlas, as far as I know, who is the Titan who's cursed to hold up the world. I do not like this version of the story because Perseus kills Atlas. Atlas is an important part in Hercules' 11th labor. Perseus is Hercules' ancestor. The timeline does not loop. So that has never super worked for me. But one of the big things that Prometheus does and that he's most famous for is meddling. And he cannot leave mankind alone for even 10 minutes. Like giving mankind fire was not the start of him meddling with it. And in most versions of the story, he is actually eventually released from the mountain with the eagle liver situation. And in those stories, it's always given as and he got out, so it's okay, it doesn't matter. And I think that is profoundly unfair on what he went through.
Mm.
But even in those, then he goes back to being free and he stops meddling with mankind. And I do not believe that man to be capable of that.
Okay, no, that's
So
fair.
I killed him instead.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Zeus is more obviously a problem for various reasons, and then makes you wonder about Prometheus.
Yeah, I think the more you look into any of the gods, the more you find their moments where they are clearly the problem. Like, I have had various people, not always sober, very passionately tell me why X, Y, or Z god is definitely the worst of the gods. And everyone has very strong opinions about it when they do this. And I am personally inclined to believe that Zeus is the worst, but no one is perfect over that scale of time. And the gods in particular, really quite awful over that period of time, apart from Hestia. Hestia's nice.
Hestia, yeah.
Even though I did her so dirty in the book.
Yeah, that's true, but also at the same time, you do get that very niceness from her. You do always tell us that she's a nice person, so you may do what you do at the end, but yeah. You're making me think about something else that I was thinking when I first picked up the book, and because I didn't have the experience of reading Herc in particular, and finding it very different and going like, oh, this is a very different way of telling mythology, and thinking of how well it did match your prose and your comedy and everything that you're doing really does match the messiness of the gods as well.
Yeah, no, they are all messes, and I think all of the gods act like they are the main character all of the time, and that is one of the reasons you have this massive wake of destruction around them, is I'm the only person that matters in the world, everyone else is my supporting cast. And you have that many people do that in one room, and it's a bit explosive.
Yeah, no, true. I kind of want to go to the ending and ask you about, like, I kind of guess where you were going with what you were doing and the whole kind of translating it into Roman mythology. I thought, okay, Aphrodite's going to become Venus. So, yeah, I just want to ask you about the importance of, like, outright showing Aphrodite becoming Venus as the Romans took over, and kind of, like, yeah, focusing on her. I know the book is called Aphrodite, obviously, but focusing more on that aspect rather than the other gods becoming, so, like, Zeus, Jupiter, and kind of keeping it on Aphrodite. Why that was important to you.
I think with that, it's partly about, because the Trojan War is so directly the gods fighting each other, admittedly with humans as their weapons, but it is something where there is a winner, and Aphrodite personally believes herself to be a winner. And you get back to this place where she's partly in and partly out with the gods, so not experiencing the transition between ages in the same way the other gods do, but being a little apart and a little separate as she becomes Venus, I think really translates into that. But the biggest one is that Aphrodite's son, Aeneas, is the one who sails off and founds what becomes Rome, broadly. So Rome is populated by her descendants, and I think a big piece of it is that, where it really is hers. She is the mother of Rome. And that is the key thing for me about moving into it, is not just about the identity shift, but the ownership and staking her claim and sticking her flag on the moon. Push the metaphor far too far.
No, I think that's apt. I mean, you've got, like, Artemis of the Moon and things, and it makes sense. Have I heard that you've made a jumper for Herc, which was very nice.
Yes.
Are you making a jumper? Do you think you might in the future for this book, for the cover?
I don't think I'll knit one for this. I don't think the cover lends itself quite so well to knitting. And honestly, I made horrible choices with the yarn I used for the Herc jumper. The black is very fluffy and the gold shreds the black. I got these giant hairballs when I was knitting it, and it was not a good time.
Right, okay.
But broadly, I think if I do something for Aphrodite, I have recently recovered what I can only describe as the world's worst sewing machine from my parents' house. So I might try and sew something when I get good enough at sewing, because at the moment we're very much on make something boxy and stick a belt on it. But my knitting at the moment, I'm knitting a wedding present for a friend, and I'm expecting that to take up much of the time between now and the wedding.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah. You're right. I mean, I'm not, like, the world's best knitter or anything, but yeah, you'd have a lot of, like, little patches of colour here and there, I suppose, for an Aphrodite cover that would take a lot of changes.
Yeah, I think it would just require a smaller pixel size, essentially, than I could do, unless I go down to lace weight yarn, and I don't hate myself.
Chunky all the way.
I do a lot of socks, so I can deal with sock yarn, but I'm not going smaller.
You could do socks of Aphrodite. That might be easier.
I could do socks.
Yeah, with
So
the
then
patches
if I
of
ever want
colour.
to show them off, I have to get my feet out at events, and that feels like a strange avenue to go down.
Knee-length socks. Then you just have to pull up your trousers a little bit.
That would work.
Yeah.
And we're going into autumn now, so it's better, because the issue with the Herc jumper was it's a summer release. So it was like, and here's my incredibly fluffy jumper.
So I know you said before we started recording that you can't talk too much about your next book. So if I say, what can you tell us? What do you not mind us knowing?
My favourite unhelpful teaser to give is that it is technically a sequel. One of the main characters is a direct descendant, but I would not expect it to be too similar for that.
Okay. All right, so I'm not going to ask you, because you need to keep it a secret, but there's a potential Roman thing going on then. Okay, I like that. All right, I will not ask you. That's okay. Yeah, Phoenicia, this has been lovely having you. I've learned so much about your book, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today, is what I can say. Thank you for being here.
And thank you for having me. It's been such a delight to chat.
The podcast will be back on Monday the 26th of January. Merry Christmas everybody and Happy New Year. And I do hope you enjoyed this episode. Do join me next time, and if you have a moment to spare, please do leave a rating and or review of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Podcast Addict. Thank you! Authors Afterword, episode 135, was recorded on the 12th of September and published on the 22nd of December 2025. Music and production by Charlie Place.